Good morning, students. We've yesterday finished the sugar-based industry, and we also saw that India plays a very important role when it comes to the global sugar production, and we also discussed who was the closest competitor of India when it came to sugar production, and we also looked into the fact that how the sugar that is manufactured in the cold countries, United States, Russia, Germany, France, all these countries, how that sugar is different from what we produce in the warmer countries like Brazil and India and Papua New Guinea and in many countries in the Southeast Asia. Okay, so today we look into one of the very important segments of Indian economy, which you see, which you see in your daily life all the time, which is mineral-based industries. Industries that use minerals and metals as raw materials are called mineral based industries. Can you name some industries that would fall in this category? Iron and steel industry, that happens to be the most important one, not just for India. In fact, any country who wants to modernize, any country that wants to get into or become a part of the global family in terms of modernization, in terms of industrialization, in terms of manufacturing, has to start with iron and steel. It was the same thing that was started in India more than 100 years ago, when Indian businessmen, when they started, of course, they started with textiles. As I told you right in the beginning of this chapter, that textile happens to be the most important thing. Why? Because it happens to be the basic one. You can't do without clothes. So if you're wearing cotton clothes, whether you're wearing silk, that can depend, but you can't do without clothes. So textile was a natural choice. But after that, yes, it was iron and steel, and that is the reason why in the early years, the Tatas, they started manufacturing steel in India, because they understood that if India has to become modern, and which it was in the early years of 20th century, because students, I don't know how many of you have heard of this great French author, Victor Hugo. He said in one of his books, a very prophetic statement he made. He said that nothing can stop an idea whose time has come. Okay, so industrialization was going to be there. The farming, the golden age of farming was, of course, I won't say gone, but industrialization was now here, and it had to be welcomed with open arms. Okay, so uh, pr- so let's look into the industrialization. Iron and steel industry. The iron and steel industry is the basic industry, since all the other industries, heavy, medium, and light, depend on it for their machinery. Steel is needed to manufacture a variety of engineering goods, construction material, defense, medical, telephonics, scientific equipment, and a variety of consumer goods. Production and consumption of steel is often regarded as an index of a country's development. That is very, very true, because a country that lags behind in iron and steel, and it is not considered to be something which would be known as an advanced economy, because for simple reason that it is you can't do without steel. You look at your car, you look at your home, iron and steel is everywhere. You just have a look around it, and everything is about iron and steel. The house you live in, it would be impossible without without that TMTs, what you call TMT Saria and all those things. Your house would not stand properly. You can't do without it. So production and consumption of steel is regarded as an index of a country's development. Iron and steel, because a country that consumes more and more iron and steel is considered to be the one which is developing at a faster rate, or it is a developed country already, or it is progressing every day. The countries which where the mainstay happens to be agriculture, and where people would be living in mud houses, or people would be living in small huts, they do not need to consume iron and steel every day and every time. But a country which is developing, a country which is setting up industries, a country where everyday homes are being made, skyscrapers are happening, naturally you can't do without iron and steel. Iron ore, coking coal, and limestone are required in the ratio of approximately 4:2:1. Some quantities of manganese is also required to harden the steel. Where should the steel plants be ideally located? Remember that the finished products also need an efficient transport network for the distribution to the markets and consumers. In 2018, with 106.5 million tons of crude steel production, India ranked second among the world crude steel producers. It is the largest producer of sponge iron, and in 2018, uh, and in 2018, where is that? Yeah, in 2018, the per capita consumption of steel in the country was only around 70.9 kg per annum against the world average of 224.5 kg. So we are still kind of, I wouldn't say lagging behind, but then yes, we still have a lot of catching up to do when you come to look at the other steel consumers, iron and steel consumers around the world. Now, process of manufacturing of steel, transportation of raw material to plant, iron ore is melted. I told you yesterday what melting and smelting was. Limestone is influxing material which is added, slag is removed, coke is buried to heat the core. Guys, that's how steel gets manufactured. Pig iron, molten material poured into molds called pigs. Steel making, pig iron is further purified by melting and oxidizing. The impurities, manganese, nickel, chromium are added. Rolling, pressing, casting, and forging then finally gives the shape as to what you want. Guys, the same steel roll can be used for making machinery equipment. It can be still used for making cars. Everything depends on what you want, and based on that, what you want, you would be having, you know, manganese or nickel or chromium that would be added. Guys, just take a very common and a simple example. Now say yes, say for example, your body gets kind of, there is a slight cut because of a blade or a scissor or something, and immediately you start putting in Dettol or something because you feel that the infection might spread, and just to basically to prevent some infection, you pour either Dettol or some Borolane or Boroplast, whatever, some kind of an antiseptic arrangement is done here. But imagine a doctor. Do you think any kind of a surgery anywhere on this planet can be performed without sharp weapons, without scalpel or scissor and hundreds of basically surgical items? Do you think a human being can be cut through without all those steel equipments, without all those tools which a doctor has? No. Why do you think the infection doesn't spread? He's cutting you into kind of, he's slicing your body through. There's no infection. Why? Because that steel is a different kind of steel. The whether they are adding nickel or manganese, chromium, everything is being done in a different kind of fashion, and that is the reason why there is no threat of infection, because that's a different kind of steel. So basically, what you need the stuff for, that is what is important. Okay, guys, this is a very important map in terms of not just that it tells you that the major steel plants in India they are located, but all the Indian iron and steel plants. But remember one thing, students. Yeah, these red dots are essentially about the iron and steel plants which are owned by government of India. They are not showing you this iron and steel plants which are privately owned by companies like Jindal or ArcelorMittal or the Tatas. They are not showing you those locations at all. They are just talking about the public sector undertakings, okay, that is owned by government of India. Now, most of the public sector undertaking market their steel through Steel Authority of India Limited, and in 1950s, China and India produced almost the same quantity of steel. Today, China is the largest producer of steel. China is also the world's largest consumer of steel. Students, that is what we were saying, that it is obvious that Chinese economy, that gives you an impression that Chinese economy is prospering at a much faster rate and also doing much better than Indian economy, because they also happen to be the largest, not just the largest producer of steel, but also the largest consumer of steel. And that gives you an idea about their pace of economic growth. They are setting up factories, more factories than India. They are building more buildings than India. Their cities and towns are expanding at a much faster rate than India. Their urbanization is happening at a much faster rate than India. That there, even in villages, the people who now, because it gives you also an idea about the economic prosperity of the people, because now people who earlier would be living in thatched houses and mud houses, now they have started opting for much more durable and stable houses like yours and mine. So naturally all of that needs iron and steel. So that is the reason why China just happens also to be the largest consumer of steel, and because their economic growth happens to be happening at a much faster rate than compared to India. Chotanagpur Plateau region has the maximum concentration of iron and steel industries. It is largely because of the relative advantages this region has for the development of this industry. These include low cost of iron ore, high grade raw materials in proximity, cheap labor, and vast growth potential in the home market. Though India is an important iron and steel producing country in the world, yet we are not able to perform to our full potential, largely due to the first reason is the uh, the high cost and limited availability of coking coal, low productivity of labor, irregular supply of energy, and poor infrastructure. Something which is true, even today. It was true even in 1980s, and it is true even now. Now, the point is, we can't do much about the availability of coking coal, because that is something of nature. Either you have it or you don't. Now, lower productivity of labor, because lower productivity of labor, it is calculated in terms of how many, say, if a factory employs 500 laborers, then what is its annual production? Compared to, say, a factory in China or a factory in Germany or England or France for that matter, where if 500 people are employed, what is their production? Now, the production could have suffered for various reasons, because the factory went on strike, or because some kind of the supply of raw material was interrupted because of whatever different reasons, flood, what, whatever 200 reasons there could be. But the fact is, if at the end of the year, the production would be calculated on basis of those 500 labors. Right now, that is the place where India actually lags behind, because if we have 500 laborers working in that particular factory, and when you compare it with, say, the situation in Japan or South Korea or wherever, their productivity happens to be the amount of steel, iron and steel that you would be able to produce. They produce it far more, because it could be anything, because they have better technology with them, they have fewer labor problems. It could be any reason for that matter. But net India lags behind. Now, irregular supply of energy, yes, we know it, that yes, electricity is a huge problem. Most of the factories in India, the steel, iron and steel produce, not just the iron and steel producing factories, any large factory for that matter, has its own captive power unit. Captive power unit has its internal energy grid, has its internal power plant, because it doesn't rely on these factories do not rely on the government to actually provide them with 24-hour electric supply, because you have seen it even in Dehradun. The electric supply which is made by the government is very, very erratic. Okay, thank you.